Hello and welcome to the next episode of Cylinder Radio. I'm your host, Will Roosh, and I am loving my podcast lately because I am getting on such cool people to have really important conversations with. And today is no different. Today I have Kimi Katiti. She is a visual and musical artist, originally from Uganda. And I found her on YouTube making some videos that we're going to discuss today. And I went to your website, Kimi, and your art is amazing. You are very, very talented.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, in so many different spheres too.
Thanks.
Like,
I dabble a bit.
So, before I get into your bio, which I do want to hear, just jumping right into you as an artist, how do you make music and visual art, and you do like philosophy, kind of like you mix all of this? Do you find that getting better at one makes the other ones improve, or something along those lines? Because it's interesting that you're good at so many different forms of art.
Thank you so much, first of all. And to answer that, I would say absolutely. Music sort of feeds the art. Art then in turn sort of makes me wonder about like philosophy and different schools of thought. And then that comes back to feed my lyricism and my writing. And my writing will inspire me to learn new recording techniques. And so that sort of is like a cycle and, interesting kind of feedback loop that I have amongst my different interests.
Yeah, it's interesting how that goes into philosophy then. It's almost like how the Renaissance led to the Enlightenment. It just opens up parts of your brain that you go, oh my gosh, I'm seeing things differently now. And that might actually be, I'm interested to see if that was a catalyst for kind of the process that you're on now, talking about anti-racism, critical race theory and stuff like that, and its kind of modern iteration. So before we get into that, can you just give us a little bit of your background, kind of who you are, where you're from, and things like that?
Absolutely. So I am an interdisciplinary artist. I'm originally from Uganda, moved here to the United States when I was 19, and I have been here for 8 years now. I'm 27. And I initially wanted to become a fine artist, like fine artist, painter, like the Renaissance artists. But I just found that a bit too limiting. And so I delved into studying audio production and sound engineering. And throughout that process of going to college, my thinking of the world was sort of manipulated because it was, I sort of veered off into the woke ideology without noticing it at all. But then I have always had a Christian faith since I was very young, since I was like 8. So that sort of was running in the background as well. And now I'm working in the music industry, kind of behind the scenes. And it wasn't too long before my sort of Christian faith kind of was knocking at the door. I was like, a lot of the things that I saw were not in alignment with what I believed as core beliefs. And so that kind of broke me out of the wokeness thing. But yeah, that's a brief rundown.
Yeah, but that's an interesting. You talked about your Christian faith. Now that is something that has come up a couple of times with different guests who were on a similar path of, just for lack of a better term, like wokeness, and then breaking out of that was Christianity or religion or something else. And the way I kind of think about it, and I've talked about religion a lot. I like talking about religion a lot. I don't feel threatened. Like I'm Christian. I think I'm Christian. So I like the stories of Christianity a lot. But I love reading atheist books because I like challenging it because I think it'll hold up to challenge.
Yeah.
And I think of it like an OS, like an operating system. Like you got to operate some sort of framework for what is life. And some scientists and stuff, they might not need religion and they just go on the discovery as their OS or something like that. But it seems like a lot of people in this social justice, capital S, capital J world are maybe atheists, and their OS is the woke stuff. Does that resonate with you? And that's why they were in conflict. Is that accurate?
Absolutely. I think that is a great analysis. From my own experience, it seems as though there's a lot of catering to guilt for people who have nowhere to put their guilt. So there's a lot of people who will deny the notion that you can do something wrong and feel guilty about it because there's sort of this hedonistic availability, like you can do whatever you want and find pleasure however you want. and then there's a denial of the guilt of certain things that you do get into, but you don't know how to address them. And I believe social justice just caters perfectly to that, because it reawakens that sense of guilt and penance and repentance. And so I found that a lot of people who are extremely anti-religious still sort of need like that operating system, and they find that it's so easy to get into that through social justice, because it's do good, you know, just do good for those who don't have opportunities like you. That's how it reels people in. But before you know it, you have tenets in this religion, you have things you have to adhere to and things that you must not adhere to at all. And it is way more encompassing and like because it doesn't have a lot of walls or, you know, guidance, people just go headstrong into it, and it ends up being more cultish than even religious in a way. So yeah, I've found like people who are in denial of like the need of an operating system tend to just fall into the operating system of critical social justice.
Yeah, and it doesn't hold up to scrutiny the way that, you know, maybe like Judeo-Christian belief or other things do. Like there's you know, apologetics, and there's debates on science versus religion. There's so many of them. You know, Rabbi Wolpe or John Lennox at Oxford, you know, are like religious people debating, you know, whatever, Sam Harris or something like that. Jordan Peterson's Sam Harris is a well-known one too. I mean, they hold up, but you don't see whatever Ibram Kendi or Kimberly Crenshaw ever getting in like a long form 4-hour debate about their ideas. I think that says something. If you're going to subscribe to some sort of OS, like, does it work? Does it hold up to scrutiny? I mean, all this stuff is very, very new. Very new.
Yeah. It's as recent as what, 1989 or even like the 80s, and just the Frankfurt School being sort of a 20th century issue. For me, that alone is enough to be like, well, I don't need to subscribe to this. And it doesn't teach me racism because racism, you know, preceded it. So I personally just look at it as an art form. For example, like you have Cubism or you have Dada. And so the moment I realized that there was sort of an introduction to it as the way of life, and as an artist, I was like, that can't be true, because it's just a philosophical school that was, you know, one of very many throughout a very short period of time. So yeah, it is interesting to see that people aren't really willing to question it, aren't really willing to stand back and say, is this the way? Aren't really ready to have debate the way we have, like, you know, William Lane Craig or people who are like, let me go head to head with the atheists, because if I'm proven wrong, then it just is more of it's more truth. Like you're seeking truth, so they're willing to butt heads with those who don't agree with them in order to find the truth. The ultimate search is the truth. I just don't see that with, you know, the critical theorists. It's and then that makes me lose this respect for it, you know.
I'm so aligned with you on this. Like, if I am proven wrong, I go, oh, good, I'm updating my OS to something better. Like, I get it, and that's probably my biggest concern, honestly, is like the lack of willingness to engage, and then the times that I have engaged, it just didn't go well typically, and I think, I'm with you. I think that's that's the biggest worry that I have, is the lack of trying to find, is this truthful, as opposed to it's truthful because I say so and that's the end of it.
Right. Exactly.
Not good. When I was really excited to bring you on, when I did, after watching one of your videos, and you titled it like how I escaped the cult of wokeness or something along those lines, and I'm sure it kind of blew up because it did, right? Like because I think a lot of people are kind of waking up, for lack of a better term, woke, to what this is. And I've talked to a couple of people who are like influencers and stuff on social media, and they're like, like we were all on board, and then we went, oh, what is this? And I was too. I mean, I was going to go back, you know, probably like 2013 to 2014, but I was like, how could you ever be against anti-racism or whatever it is? And then things start to pop up and you start to open up your eyes and you go, oh. So what I did was I asked people, what would you like to know? And I asked specifically two people in the quote unquote cult of wokeness. I asked people who I know to be very, you know, critical social justice people. And I DM'd them. And I said, do you have any questions? Do you have any questions for someone who said that they subscribed to it and now they're out? And I got almost nothing. like they were like, no, I don't think so. They have their mind made up about who you are.
Yeah.
Oh no, she's just a tool for white supremacy, or she's
Mhm.
just, a Republican or whatever. She's just the next Candace Owens or whatever it might be. I didn't say it was you, by the way. I just said I'm bringing on, someone who escaped it, who's a Black woman.
Yeah.
And I got some like questions from people who are kind of maybe more borderline, and it was questions along the lines of just like kind of I'll kind of broad view it, and then you can kind of maybe respond to all of it. It's like, what led you to wake up? So you said it was your Christian faith was butting heads, but was there like a moment? Was there a moment where you started to go, wait a second, like the end of an M. Night Shyamalan movie, or like, oh my gosh, she's the ghost? Like, was there a moment where you had that, or like the Emperor Has No Clothes? You're like, wait a second, he's naked. Like, what was that moment? Because what I'm thinking is, if we can pinpoint a moment for you, then we can have other people, even if it's just subconsciously, it's in the back of their head that there's a moment like that might come for them.
Right. That's a great question. And full transparency, I can't really say that there was one moment. It was like a period of a year of just slow questioning, I talk about in that Cult to Wokeness video, I went through a process of just forgiving people for minor offenses, and then that expanded into offenses that fell under the umbrella of racism or microaggressions. And before I knew it, I had developed habits that sort of fortified me against taking offense easily. And that changed it. I believe it even changed my wiring, because it was hard for me to look at those so-called microaggressions in the same light. But I would say, one incident that I remember vividly, that I talk about in the video, is going to a group that I would go to, like a Bible study group, and everyone there was like either white or Hispanic, just like I was like the only Black person. And every time I went there, like there would be like 100 things that I would leave, and it would leave me crippled with anxiety, because they're like 100 microaggressions that I've experienced in 1 hour. Yeah. And I was like, the Bible never talks about this ever. The Bible's literally never like, you will go into a space and feel 100 things and leave. If anything, it says, treat others better than yourselves. That was the main verse that was very shocking to me. It didn't specify treat a certain group of people as better than yourself. It said treat everyone better than yourself. So I really had a heart check moment where I was like, well, I perceive those people as being passively aggressive towards me, but I still have to treat them better than myself, which means I have to forgive them, which means I have to kind of, and if I want peace, I have to surrender that anxiety to like Jesus, because he's very emphatic about surrendering our burdens and our cares. There's scripture about laying your anxieties on God in Philippians. There are a lot of examples of the Bible being very adamant about offense and how we shouldn't hold on to it. So I think this was like the cusp of 2018, 2019, where I noticed my anxiety levels were just, I couldn't bear them, and they were like physically causing me illness, that I started to just journal out everything everyone has like done, like all those little knives of microaggressions. And it's funny because this microaggression theme is like the opening paragraph to one of the critical race theory books, as like, an example of what Black people go through. But it was something that I could escape from with by journaling. Like, it wasn't that crazy. It wasn't that hard to just kind of lay that stuff down. So I would write it down, maybe say like once a week, I would gather all the microaggressions of the week, and then just kind of be like, I forgive this person, and I forgive them for doing this. And then it transformed from the verbal to, from the written to the verbal. So whenever something would happen within, maybe an hour of like catching myself ruminating on an incident, I'll just be like, you know what, I forgive them, I bless them, I release them, and I love them. And that process over a year, even more than a year now, kind of, everything couldn't hold up to it anymore. So yeah, that's that's the most basic example I can give. There is another one if you want me to get into it.
Please.
That
Yeah.
that
You
was
laid this
more.
out in your video, by the way, Kimmy, and it's so well done. Like the way you talk about
Thank you.
offense and how it bothered you, the anxiety you felt, and everything like that. So yeah, but
Right.
please give it another one.
Okay. So the next one was through skateboarding actually, and I still, even though I was forgiving people on the basis of race, I thought that was normal. I thought a lot of people would just like take to that and be like, oh yeah, okay, I'll forgive according to race. I did not quite know that there was such a wall against that. Like people didn't want to do that. And I started going to skate parks, started skating again in 2019 as just a hobby and, you know, recreational activity. And going to skate parks was very scary for me because it's like you're inviting like a platter of microaggressions because you're dealing with like white men, you know, they're focused on their sport, like this is their domain, they come here to be away from all that stuff. And as I'm going into these spaces, I'm literally expecting like the worst of the worst, and I get the best treatment, like literally a cognitive dissonant moment of just like people are nice to me. Like, oh my gosh, like I went to Santa Clarita, which is supposed to be like this conservative, like white place where like you're never gonna find anyone who accepts you. And that was the friendliest skate park I have ever been to. No skate park in LA can actually compare to Santa Clarita. The children were so well behaved. They were all like, hey, do you need help? I want to, you know, help you out on this trick. Everyone was like that. Which really, it just shattered that idea that I'd been taught in college that, you know, there's just this natural like tendency towards microaggressions. And so I started to realize that it's more of an individual thing. Like it's up to the person, how they're raised, how the manners that they have, the values that they uphold, you know, their exposure to people of other races and like genders or whatever. Like it depends on the person. We can't just blanket everyone in a category. So that really started to even pin deeper to the issue that the theory didn't hold up in real life. It was almost just like subjective oppression, if that's a term that I could use.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. So you said people don't speak up against it. I think there's a lot of reasons why. I think it's fear is the biggest one. When you speak up, you get labeled the worst. I mean, you get called the worst. Being called a racist is pretty horrible because universally in like the modern world, you know that racism is bad, it's dumb, it's associated with all of these negative things. And we know that to be true. Someone who is like a lack of a better term, like a real racist, you go, oh, well, that person's an idiot. Like, why would you think this way? That's a bad OS, to stick with the metaphor. So I get that. But for me, and I'm like all those things, I'm a cis-het white man is what I get called all the time, which is true. Not the way I think of myself, but that those labels hold up. I get that it's scary to be labeled a racist, but I still do it because I know who I am. And I think that I'm very confident in who I am, who I have in my life, the experiences that I've had, the people I surround myself with. I challenge myself so much, even if I see someone and I have a prejudiced thought about them, it could be for a million different things, but it could be racially involved too, is I challenge that right away and I look at everything. And we have prejudices, but that's different than racism. Prejudice is just, oh, I see someone, I assume certain things, but then you get to know them and you update your information based on getting to know them. But I get the pushback. It is scary. You went public with this. Were you hesitant to do that? And did you get pushback?
So funny thing is, the first video I put up that was sort of controversial was, this is why I hate critical race theory. And that, honestly, I put that up just for my own headaches. Like I had headaches and I just thought like, I have these headaches because I'm not saying what I need to say. And it was like a permanent migraine that it wouldn't go away. Like I'd had it ever since 2020 and everything went down. And I'm like, what do I do? I'd been to doctors. I'd literally sought help, got assessment. No one could pin anything to anything, except to say that I'm extremely stressed and I need to find ways to de-stress. So I was put on vitamin B12, but that wasn't doing anything. And then I just decided, you know what? I know people who've had stress-related alopecia, for example, and this might be a manifestation of my sort of closeted, unawoke, woke. You know what I mean? So,
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, I'm just gonna make this video. I'll put it up on YouTube, and it's gonna get like 30 views max. Like, it doesn't matter. No one's gonna watch it, and I'll just be fine. At least I would have expressed it in some way or form. Lo and behold, it just like took off from like the moment I posted it online. But to my surprise, a lot of people that I was scared, like, I'm gonna get pushback from these specific people. A lot of those people were actually in agreement with what I was saying, or they were willing to listen. So my fears, in a way, just like my fears with like cis white men were kind of exaggerated and not based in reality, so were my fears about what people would say. Only once I did it did I realize, like, oh wait, a lot of people actually agree with that sort of centrist thinking.
Yeah.
And that inspired me to kind of keep going, because I'm like, who else agrees with this? Who else is out there? Who else is sort of hiding in the woke crowd, but they don't have anything to anchor to, or, you know, be encouraged by? So yeah, that was how that went.
I get, like, am very lucky to be surrounded with a lot of very racially diverse people that like kind of guide me and support like what I'm doing and everything like that, see what I'm doing and things like that. But if I didn't have that, I get why someone who might be white and sees this kind of stuff goes, man, I want to speak up, but I can't. And then you as a black woman speak up, and they just feel like, oh, good, someone's saying it, because that's the way I felt, but maybe I wasn't like allowed to say it. Mm-hmm. So I understand that. And but I'm guessing that you got, like when you say people came out and support, I'm guessing it was pretty diverse.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, extremely diverse. So much so that I can't even say like it was mostly this or mostly that. Right. It's just extraordinary. Same. Yeah,
I have the same. Although, do you know what I do have? And this, you kind of fit into this, is I have a lot of people on my social media that I connect with and give me really good perspectives and support what I'm doing, that are women who are African immigrants. A lot of women from Nigeria and things like that. A lot. And so there's something to that. I have a friend named Musai who lives in, he's from Mali, but he lives in Philadelphia, and I see him from time to time. And he talks about how there's a real rift in his neighborhood between the African immigrants and the African American, you know, like who've been here like generationally, and there's like a real tension there. But I see a lot more, it seems like, I don't know if there's a lot more, but I see a lot of African immigrants speaking up against this stuff, at least in my, you know, bubble. Why do you think that is? Because I've talked to some people and they say, well, we came from a country that didn't have opportunities like America has, and we came from a place that had all kinds of classes, but it was all black people, so there was still the same dynamics, but it wasn't based on race. Like, I've heard those kinds of things. What do you think that is?
Well, those points are absolutely, in my case, they're very true. And also, first of all, just growing up in an environment where you are all the same color, but you still see the you know, the hierarchies that develop, makes you realize that there's more to people's motives than just purely skin color. Like, it isn't that simple. And then for me, you know, coming to the States, it's so easy. Like, it's just so, everything's laid out. I can go to the post office and, you know, send mail out, and I don't have to fear that it's going to just disappear. Like, these are simple things that you just can't have in Africa, because we're still developing, we're still growing past all the things that have happened. It's still very fresh, right? So I come to the States, and then it's just incredibly easy. People are friendly to a very frightening degree. And it's just like, wow, like how does this exist? And in the same breath, there are people who are like, America is the worst place. So it's hard for a lot of Africans, but myself specifically, it's hard to understand. Maybe it's just the position of just having never grown up in Africa, where like literally we don't have like roads in certain areas, you know, everything's still sort of a dirt path, or there's still development happening. People can't afford pens, they can't afford books, like kids can't afford books. People have to walk miles to school and then miles back, and it's still a reality. People don't have water. And so you go from those basic problems to finding out like here it's like ideological warfare up and down. It's like it's hard to just stay quiet and be like, okay, I'm just gonna, you know, I'm gonna take what's happening and be fine with it. And another thing is the freedom fighters in Africa have all kind of turned out to be the new dictators of today. And that's something a lot of African, that's happened to a lot of African countries, where you've had like Zimbabwe, Robert Mugabe turned out to be very dictator-like. In my own country of Uganda, we had, after, you know, we gained independence, we had Idi Amin. Now we have Museveni, who's also in a way very much of a dictator who hasn't left power for the last 30 years. So we see that skin color isn't an easy sort of road to oppression. Like you can just be greedy and be extremely evil. You know, Desmond Tutu talked about how the oppressor's skin color has just changed. Like we used to have white oppressors, and now we have black oppressors. So that's something that's very real for us. It's part of our identity. And then we come to the States and it's like all about skin color, and it's just hard to understand like why is it like this?
And well, and what you're talking about in Africa, that's everywhere, is, you know, I mean, that's the history of totalitarian regimes, is like, I will be different, I will be for the people, and then, but there's the outside, and the woke has that. I mean, they are brutal. They can be horrible to people. I mean, the people who say love trumps hate, but then I've seen posts, and it's like, you know, from like the bad, you know, the anti-Trump like social media, where it's like, if Trump came to your door, what'd you do? They're like, I would murder him. It's like, whoa, come on. Like, it's weird, because the part of that critical social justice stuff is it takes very soft-hearted people, but it does harden them. And that's one of the biggest things that I have, is I have friends who are subscribed to this, and I watched them go from just universally empathetic, where it's just like, I have empathy, I'm oozing with empathy for my fellow, you know, human, to I have empathy for that group, but not that guy, or not that person, or not that girl. They're evil. And it's just like, oh, it's so sad to see soft-hearted people who are very emotional get manipulated by this ideology and turn hard. And I've watched it. You know, it's tough. It's tough to watch. You mentioned about coming from somewhere else. There's a great quote by a Christian writer named Neil Donald Walsh. He said, the struggle ends when gratitude begins. And, you know, it's very hard to say that to people who are struggling, but it's, if they can internalize it, not be told it, but just internalize it, like, you can go through horrible things in life. You know, like there are tragedies, that we're never at a shortage of tragedies in the world. But you also have beautiful things. And if you choose to, the critical race theory is a lens. That's the way they say it. It's a lens to view society through. You can view through a very grateful lens too.
Absolutely.
Like you can put that monocle on.
Right. No, 100%.
So, you know, it's interesting, because when you're talking, I'm just like, yep, agree. This is supposed to be the podcast where I bring on people that disagree, and I try and give pushback. But I'm in an echo chamber too, Kimi. Like I am the anti-echo chamber person. I try and break my echo chambers. And I've invited a lot of critical race theory people on this podcast, and they don't. I've gotten Rod Graham and Christine Sleater, and we dove into a little bit, but very little. But the issue that I have is, you know, my echo chamber, even my like woke friends, once I talk to them, they if they're reasonable, then we end up going eye to eye, because it's not that I'm right, it's just my approach they see is like the right approach. Or if they disagree with me, it's not based in any kind of reason, it's solely like a heart thing. Like I've had friends tell me, you know, stop with the facts and data, Will, it's about humanity, not facts. and it's so hard for me to be like, well, that's not facts. How many, what is the infant mortality rate? That
Right.
is humanity, and it's facts. Like,
exactly.
But they're not going into that world at all. But most people, I want to have people in the podcast because I think we'll find common ground. We'll see the cylinder. But you and I just seem like we just seem to be aligning, and instead it becomes just I'm learning from you and getting more confirmation bias, which isn't really my goal, but that might mean that we're on to something then.
Right. I mean, I haven't really met you before, but it's interesting that we kind of see the same things for coming from different backgrounds. Yeah, honestly.
Yeah.
So I think we are getting onto something. And I'm noticing just the stepping back alone allows for so many viewpoints, but just the agreement of the stepping back alone makes us seem like we're in an echo chamber, which I think I don't know if I could put this in an art context. We've sort of stepped away from looking at art as cubism only, and then you step away and you're like, oh, there's actually a timeline here. And it means that I appreciate art so much more because I'm willing to see the timeline. Yeah. But that doesn't necessarily make us like echo chambered. We're just stepping back to appreciate so much more. And while that might make us similar in that sense, I think it makes us more fair and more exposed. I don't know. I just think and I think it's also tricky for the social justice people to just be like, oh, but you just believe one thing. It's like, well, are you in a position to say that? Like, I hate to be that like girl to be like, kind of judgmental, but it's hard for someone who is in the like the Waco, Texas cult to really have a very holistic view of the world. It's like, I understand where you're coming from, but you're in a dangerous position, whereas I'm in a more peaceful and reasonable position. And I don't think we can really compare apples and oranges here. It's like, you really need help. We really need to help those people who are in that bubble. I don't know. That's just my opinion, but it's like.
I agree with you. And when you say peaceful, you broke that down in your video. Like you had like a good night's sleep finally.
Yeah.
Like my wife went through something similar. She wasn't like in like the woke cult per se, but she was kind of an attempt in her industry to cancel her.
Oh, no.
And she was really struggling about it and like, oh, what did I do wrong? All this kind of stuff. She started watching videos of Africa Brooke, who I had on the podcast, and she's awesome. And it really changed her. My wife just like, okay, no, those people that I've never met and don't know me, they don't determine who I am. Like, and it gave her just like a peace, like a blanket of peace.
Right.
To try and just break, and I agree with you. I don't know if it's an echo chamber, because you could say that there's an echo chamber around physicists about how fast gravity falls. So I don't know if it's necessarily an echo chamber. But when you were in this thinking, did you find any positives to it? Is there a positive? Like, what is the if there is just a lot of seeds and stuff, what is the juicy good fruit in that? Is there?
The only thing I could say that would keep someone sort of like addicted to that, and I want to make a point about like doctors actually after this, but the only thing about it is you get to ruminate in your anger. That's the only, and that's not even a good thing because of the long-term effects, but that's the only thing, is you get to kind of feel like, like I can tweet about white people because like they do all these things to me. That honestly, that's the only sort of like fruit that comes from it. Is imagine you've gotten into an argument and you start thinking about how all the ways you were right when you were in the argument, and you're like, yeah, I totally crushed that person, like, yeah, and then after a while you're like, no, I don't think that was right. I don't think we should have fought. I don't think there was any benefit to sort of having this heated discussion. So then you kind of walk away like, wow, I probably shouldn't do that. Like, I need to correct my character. So it's just that brief, like, spark of anger that I think is thrilling for a lot of people. Also, just the opportunity to be self-righteous for someone who comes from Christianity, it's easier for me to digest self-righteousness because I go to church, we talk about that a lot. For people who don't even know what the concept of self-righteousness is, they just see that as righteousness. It's just like, I'm right, like
I'm a good person.
I'm a good person. Like I am justified in my vitriol. Like I am ready to go out and tell other people what to do. So that juiciness of that is what I would say was the hook. But is it sustainable? And so the point I wanted to make about the doctor is, you don't go to the doctor to, learn about a disease and then be like, okay, cool, I'm going to live with this. Like, I have a tumor. Awesome. Like, that's just another option in life. Like, no, there's a standard of healthy living. There's a standard of what it means to be a functional human. You can literally just go to the doctor, find out those markers, and they'll tell you this is wrong. This is not normal. This is an anomaly. And they will tell you how to come back to just that level of normalcy. But to sort of act like, it's normal to hold on to anger is just inhuman. Normal to seek vengeance and to just like destroy everything. It's an indication of a deviation that's not going to work out for you in the end. Like you're not going to be the person you want to be. Like that's not going to be the route to peace, and that's not going to be the route to your insomnia. Like think about those things in your personal life. I'm speaking to anyone who happens to be like woke and is listening to this. Just think about those markers. Do you want to sleep better? Do you want to have healthy friendships and relationships? Do you want to stop like punching the walls or like inflicting harm on others? Then consider the things that might be off mentally, consider the things that might be off philosophically, and then strive to get better. And listen to the people who say that there is a difference between wokeness and not being woke.
And there is data to support it now. I was just talking to John Haidt, the brilliant social psychologist, and he was showing me graphs of how Generation Z liberal women have it's like 56% have diagnosed anxiety or depression. Wow. Like it's actually in data now that people, and it is aligned with their political ideology.
Wow.
Which is very interesting. So what you're saying is anecdotally true. It's true based on what you see in the world, and it's also true based on the data that's coming out now. And it just makes perfect sense. It seems to be all very aligned, and this is, cult, we said the cult of wokeness, like maybe people think that that's harsh, but I think it's accurate just in that the people who are deeply involved in this won't listen to you. They won't listen to this podcast. They will, or if they do, they won't actually be listening. They will just look to discredit you and call you some sort of tool of, white supremacy, because I think you hit it where people feel righteous. They feel like a good person. It's nice to feel like a good person. Like the world is complicated. How do you know what is good or bad? You need some sort of moral operating system, as we said. So if you think I'm a good person, then you have someone who's, really very well thought out, such as yourself, and such a clear communicator. It's like, that's going to shatter my whole idea of me being a good person. That's too disruptive. I can't do it. It's too disruptive. It's too scary. I need to push against that. And I might do it in a very, violent or aggressive way. And I think that's what it is, but I don't know, but that's what I think. That's what I think it is.
Yeah. It makes me worry because I'm not even just like any old person who's never been woke. I know exactly what it feels like to listen for what's wrong, to listen into a podcast like this as a woke person and want to just pick apart all the reasons that, you're that way or like I'm this way. I remember doing that to several people and just being like, yeah, I'm only interested in what's going to in turn serve to feed my own self-righteousness. And so if you don't have terms for that and you don't sort of have any walls, there's this author, Frank Peretti, that describes sort of navigating without any moral code as like walking without any, walls or guardrails. You're never really going to know, you're never going to acknowledge it, which just feeds into more and more of that like deterioration of health stuff, and it's just so sad to witness. But then if it's me talking over and over and over and over and over and over again to get someone to wake up and just be tired and then just be so full of it, so full of the information that people are putting out there, it's worth it. It's like, you're not going to wake up until like everyone around you is literally discrediting you and pushing you to the side because you're too toxic to hang around. I'm like, it's worth it because I want to pull you out of that death, you know?
Because you care. And, you know, and someone said to me, they said, like, Will, I see what you're doing, but you're planting dirt and there's no seed in there. You got to wait till there's a seed. And that was really good advice. And I think that I'm trying to say, get out of the coal, get out of the coal, get out of the coal. And they are just like not ready to hear it, essentially. And I don't know. So maybe it's just nudging a little bit. Maybe it's exposing them to different thinkers who look differently and sound differently and are different. You know, the fact that you're an artist and you are, you know, art is typically something that's more right brain. It's more on like the left end of the political spectrum. So maybe that's a way, maybe through your art and things like that, through your expression about common humanity, maybe that's a way. I don't know, but I do get it because especially I had Professor Eric Smith on my podcast, and he is a Black man. He says, like, I think this is bad for Black people, for my people. So that's why I'm pushing back, is this is very limiting. His whole thing is empowerment theory. And he said, this is very limiting. And I don't want to make my people angry unnecessarily. There's a lot to be angry about. You want to look at how terrible Black people have been treated in this country. You can do that all day long, every day, and just never do anything productive and just be horribly saddened by the reality of what happened. Or you can look at that and say, okay, that happened, true, internalize it, and then go, okay, now we're moving forward. I have different opportunities. I can do something better. My generation can be different than the generation that came before, and something along those lines. But yeah, I get why you'd be passionate about getting people out.
Yeah. There was a process, definitely a process, but just realizing some pain is there's nothing you can do to fix it. You just have to kind of forgive. Some debts are just too big. Like, there's no way anyone's gonna fix it. And I won't even appreciate everything that's like laid out for me in return unless I personally let go of the grudge in and of itself in my own heart. So like you said, gratitude is so important. You could ask and protest for everything that you want, right? And everyone around you will be okay. But if you haven't personally forgiven or let go of that attachment, that string that, you know, that's attached to you, it's like none of it even is worth it. So, you know, why not just start now, forgive now, and then work to improve the lives of those around you, your immediate folks, your immediate family, your immediate friends. And I'm speaking to, like, you know, those who are still woke and they believe there is some sort of justice to be administered. Why not start with the peace? Like, why do we have to go about this in anger and in frustration and in anxiety? Like, why not forgive now, forgive the debt, forgive what happened in the past, forgive situations that you'll never be able to go back and correct. And then from that place, we can actually start to look at things that are actually wrong and go with it with full mental clarity, with full health, with rational thinking, you know, clear thinking. So yeah, that's something I would throw out there as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think one of the things that I've grown more and more concerned about is that this thinking will become a self-fulfilling prophecy. If everything is racist and everything like that, but it's a small microaggression, or if I just say, you know, nice hair, it's like, well, that's really problematic and you're a racist and stuff. As I worry that eventually, so then maybe I get canceled, and then I just, you know, human beings need community, we need a tribe. So I'm looking around, no, you're a bad guy, you're a racist. I'm like, no, I'm not. And then all of a sudden someone's gonna go, hey, Will, come on over, big hug.
Right.
And it's a real racist. And I think that racism is real. There are, you know, bad-minded people out there who do want harm. And I think this is feeding it. And then the critical race theory, the critical social justice people that say, you know, racism, there's underlying white supremacy and everything. When that people get pushed and pushed and pushed to a tipping point, and then they might start acting in a very ugly racist way, then they can go, see,
Yeah.
I told you. And Jussie Smollett, which was fake, because that kind of stuff doesn't really happen very much anymore, which is incredible, is gonna become real. And they're gonna say, see, we knew that Jussie Smollett was just ahead of his time. And that is a huge concern of mine. And that's a big reason why I'm pushing back. And that doesn't seem, I thought that would resonate with some of the people in the critical social justice stuff, but they don't seem to agree.
Yeah, I'm very curious. It really hit me, the difference in thinking. Now, I never reached this point of believing that you can actually change someone or change the nature of evil and make evil go away. I never got to that place of like transformative thinking, or even just like the whole materialism of a certain concept or ideal, because of my Christian faith. But there really are people who think, if I call everyone racist enough, that's going to make all the racism go away. And there are other people who just ignore observation, they ignore science, they ignore history, historical analysis. And they're just like, no, this time we're really going to just call everyone racist and tell people to be less white. And it's going to make it happen. Like, it's really going to happen. People will be less white. Like, racism is going to go away. Like, we're going to fix it all. Which that is a whole theological debate in and of itself. But look at what's happened in history when things like this happen. When you call a certain group a certain term long enough, people don't just sit with that and go, okay, I guess, like, right. Sure, I'm a racist, I'm going to be less racist. A lot of people will pretend like, okay, sure, I'm playing along. But inside, you can't fight that human dignity. Like, people's dignity is being like hammered to the ground. Like, eventually they're going to have to stand up and be like, no. And you don't want people, like you said, going to the white supremacists for help because they're the only ones who are like, welcome to the party. That scares me a lot as well.
Yeah, no, I think that's, when you play with a certain group, you lump people in as a whole group, you got to think about who that is. And we just got to think our way through this a lot better than we are. And I think fear and anxiety and emotions are really getting clouded. Kimi, this was such a great conversation. Where can people find your work? Because it is incredible. I don't know. I was just expecting you to be someone who was like a clear thinker. And then I went to your website and I was like, oh my gosh, wait, you made these? Like, I just listened to a little bit of your music. I'm going to dive in and listen to more of it, because what I heard, I was like, well, this is good too. Like, what is going on? You're really talented. Where can people see your stuff and support your work and things like that?
My website, Kimi Katiti, KIMIKATITI.com, has all of my work, and I also have a shop available. I sell art prints. My music is also available to stream on Spotify. You can subscribe to my YouTube channel if you want to see more videos. Just type in Kimi Katiti, KIMIKATITI to YouTube, and I should pop up. And yeah, that's all of me on the internet.
Well, having artists kind of on our side, and I hate to think about it like sides, but on the side of reason and logic and civil discourse and thinking and all that kind of stuff. Having artists, I think art is, I've said this many times, I think art is going to be the pathway through, because the person who tells, the group that tells, the side that tells the best stories generally end up, winning to some degree. And artists are the ones who are our storytellers. So I really appreciate everything that you're doing, Kimi. It's really awesome.
Thank you. And likewise, I really, really appreciate all your content. I think it's very refreshing to see someone just like actually search out opposing views in order to find the truth. Like, that's really great. So keep up the good work. We're here for it.
Thank you so much. All right. Kimi Katiti, everybody.